Good afternoon, Excellency, Honorable Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Warmly welcome to the AVI-SDG Dialogue being hosted the second panel discussion. I'm Jariya, Deputy Director of the Center for Sustainable Development Study of Asian Business Institute. It's my great pleasure to be MC for the program today. As our promise, today we brought an interesting topic on equality in access to education. We would be deeply interested because we would understand how far the goal of equality in access to education has achieved, what the challenge to be addressed, and area to be improved in achieving SDG 4 during the COVID-19 pandemic and post-COVID-19 recovery. What are the practical policy and strategy to be taken to realize the goal? So today, AVI SDG Dialogue on Equality in Access to Education will give the floor discussion and exchange of ideas among relevant stakeholders to propose intervention to address the issue. Excellency, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. In this meantime, we are honored to have our prominent leader and researcher in the development field who will deliver his valuable comment in our program today. So before starting our program, please allow me to introduce our honorable speaker waiting on the screen to share his presentation and comments. First, please allow me to introduce Mr. Unsi Vatha, the Director of Planning Department, Directorate General of Policy and Planning, Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport. Sivatha trained as educational planning specialist, completing his master's degree in educational planning and management at the International Institute of Education Planning from Paris. He is pursuing PhD degree in education science at the Sinhan University of South Korea. Sivatha has over 10 years experience in managing the education strategic plan, budget strategic plan, annual operation plan, capacity development master plan, Cambodia COVID-19 pandemic response plan, and other plan and policy development at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport. He is a focal point of various national committees, the Inter-Ministry Committee, where he works on educational planning and policy, and Global Education for Partnership, where he coordinates as advisor on project proposal and oversees its overall progress. He is the national coordinator of Knowledge Innovation Exchange Hub, where connect with Cambodian National Committee and Innovation Exchange Hub, head office in Geneva. He is also a member of steering committee of Capacity Development Partnership Fund, where he works closely with United Nations Agency, Inter-Technical Department and Development Partner in developing the work plan and implement of Capacity Development Partnership Fund project. Second, please give a warmly welcome to our honorable speaker, Excellency Rosalind, who is representative of Excellency Wonmini, the President of Union Youth Federation of Cambodia, UYFC. Excellency Rosalind has worked for many years on policy in education, academic, and development. Third, please give a big applause to our honorable speaker, Mr. Chum Chandra, an education specialist for the United Nations Children Fund based in Cambodia. He is responsible for the area related to equitable access and quality education. He has international experience in education sector as an education specialist with UNICEF in Eritrea, Africa. He holds a master's degree in development and management and a master in international human rights law. He also holds certificate of school inspection from Hong Kong Institute for Education. He obtained a certificate of equity and quality education policy and leadership from Harvard University, Massachusetts, USA. The last but not least, please give a warmly welcome to our honorable speaker, Mr. Danilo Padilla, Chief of Education of UNESCO based in Cambodia. He was appointed as Chief of Education Unit at the UNESCO Phnom Penh office in March 2021. In this capacity, he led and supervised the office education team promote UNESCO education program in Cambodia through the planning, implementation, and monitoring of activity and project aimed at responding to strategic needs of the country. Prior to his appointment in Phnom Penh, Mr. Padilla held similar position at UNESCO Cluster Office for the Gulf State in Doha, where he coordinated regional work on SDG4, and the UNESCO Office in Kabul, where he managed programs in adult literacy, technical and vocational education training, TVET, and curriculum development. Before joining the UNESCO, Mr. Padilla worked with United Technology, European headquarters in France, and the Department of Foreign Affairs, Manila, Philippines. Mr. Padilla holds a master's degree in International Relations and Diplomacy from the American Graduate School of International Relations and Diplomacy of Paris. Excellency, Honorable Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, follow our agenda today. We will start our capitative program with the first agenda on government intervention and strategy to support children and youth education amid the COVID-19 pandemic and post-COVID-19 recovery, which will be conveyed to speak by Mr. Unsiwata. And the second on UNESCO initiative and support for children and youth education amid the COVID-19 pandemic and post-COVID-19 recovery. The speech will be delivered by Mr. Danilo Padilla. Third, on UNESCO initiative and support for children and youth education amid the COVID-19 pandemic and post-COVID-19 recovery will be given speech by Mr. Chongchandra. And fourth and the last will be on support for youth literacy, numeracy, and vocational training for poverty alleviation and national development. The speech will be delivered by Excellency Rosie. And for the last agenda, we will open the floor for joint discussion. Then we will have a group photo session with all our honorable speakers at the end of the program. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to have any questions during the presentation period, please drop your question in Zoom or Facebook Live so that our honorable speaker will address your question when the discussion session starts. So to begin our program, please allow me to invite honorable speaker from the Ministry of Education, Mr. Unsiwata, to deliver his speech. Mr. Unsiwata, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Yes, and thank you for AVI Institute as well. So let me do the presentation on the equalities in access to education in Cambodia. So I have the PowerPoint. We try to explain some point and then we can discussion together. And before we starting that, what we have to thinking what is the equalities and what is the equity or what is the equitable access to education. So the term of the equalities and equities, and we will see what is that different. And as our topic that we will focus on what is the equality access in education. Let me show the picture. When we see the picture, also we can see the equalities and the equity. When you see the picture, what do you think about the picture of the equality? So we can say that all children, they have the right to see the sport sometime like that, but also have the barrier that they cannot see because of the you can say the background are different and the age are not the same, so they cannot get more opportunity, the same opportunity to see. But let me see the equity. So they ask the ministry or they ask the government also have to provide more opportunities. They ask, for example, like we can see the picture. Everybody have the right to see the sport, but they have more opportunity or support from the government or support from the ministry and support from the other development partners to support them to see the sport. For example, when we back to the education aspect, we can say the equality, all the children, all the students can access to the school, but the family background, we can say the poor student cannot access to education, but the ministry also have to provide more opportunities like asset art program, scholarship program in order to support, and then they can access to education, or student can access to the school. That's why we can say the equity. So our topic focus on equality, but also linked to equity. This is the main point that we have to think together, even though the ministry and the government also have to thinking about the equality and equity. When we see this feature are similar, but also we can see some people and the disability student or people, we can say not here as the equality, but here is or equity, but here is no barrier, so they no need support from stakeholder, from the government or from the development partners, but they can see because no barrier, even though they are different from background, they have good physically, but they have disability, but they can see no barrier. But if they have the barrier, so they need the support from the other to get more opportunity or to see what is the insights like us here. When we look back the royal government of Cambodia policy here, we mentioned what is the rectangle strategies mentioned and what is the national strategy development plan and mentioned. Here we reflect to the royal government of the Cambodia as a strategy, rectangle strategies. When we look back the rectangles number one, because we have the full rectangle, but the rectangle number one also mentioned for the human resource development. And then also mentioned about the equality of education, science, technology, but the number four also mentioned for the gender equality and social protection. So it means that we can reflect the government also focus on how do we develop the human resource with equality of education, science, technology, and also the gender equality and social protection as well. And when we share to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, and the government, when we talking about the sustainable development goal, the government also, we have the CSDG, Cambodia Sustainable Development Goal. Normally we have 17 goals, but in Cambodia, so we have 18 goals, because it's mine. Let me see to the education sector. Also, we have IPG4, Sustainable Development Goal for education, and the ministry also developed the Cambodia Education 2030 roadmap. In this document also mentioned what is the equity and what is the equality, and how the ministry or how the government focus and support the student with the equities and equality. In this roadmap also mentioned for 5 priorities of the ADG4. The first priority focus on all the children have access to quality and equitable and quality of basic education. Here, when we reflect to the rectangle strategy, also linking with the rectangle strategies number 1, and with the top priorities of the Sustainable Development Goal 4, we can say IPG4 of the Ministry of Education. For the second priority, also access affordable quality technical and vocational education. And the third priority also mentioned for the equal access for all women and men for the quality technical vocational training, especially for the higher education. This is also linked to our topic that we talking about equality access to education, even though it's not in general education, but also in technical education and in university. that we have to how to access or ensure the equality access for a student at all levels. And the priority number 4, we mentioned about the lifelong learning opportunity. Is to have to provide more opportunity for lifelong learning. We cannot stop learning, but we keep going to study. And the last, we focus on management and leadership at all levels. For the education strategic plan, the ministry also developed, and in the education strategic plan, as we mentioned, the 2 policy objectives. The first policy objective is ensure inclusive, equitable, quality of education and promote lifelong learning opportunity for all. When we look back at these the policy objective, we have 5 words that mentioned, such as inclusive, equitable, quality of education, lifelong learning and opportunity for all. This is we can say no one behind of the education. We have to provide more opportunity to children, all children, even though the children from the rich family, from the poor family, they have to opportunity to get to access to education in order to get more knowledge. The same in the children from the rich family, you can say the better background, economic backgrounds better than other children. And the second policy objective of the education strategic plan, as we said, we focus on the effective leadership and management of the education official at all levels, even though in the ministries and the provincial district and at the school level, especially for the school director, have to more how they use the leadership style or management and coordination at the school level, because at school level is we can say the real implementer to provide the student learning outcome, the good results, or what is the result that produced by at the school. When we look back to this situation, as now we know together, we facing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So, and what is the progress and what is challenges in achieving of the FDG4? When we look back to the joint assessment between the ministries and the UNICEF and UNICEF, so here, and the Save Children, so we join together to do assessment and to see what is the challenges that we facing during the COVID-19 in education sector. There are many findings, but I just quote some findings related to what is the challenges during the COVID pandemic facing. The first is all about this dropout, right? Just dropout rate so increase here because even those know the COVID-19, but the dropout rate in lower secondary or upper secondary is still high. When the COVID-19 pandemic happening, also this is really problem of the dropout rate. And for the infrastructure of the ICT or basic learning material, still a problem. Access, participation, very distant learning. When we say the distant learning, it's kind of the new thing. When we study online, doesn't matter, but when we apply all the country, even though some teachers, they cannot use the smartphone, they can not familiar with the technology, and then very hard to use the distant learning. Even though teachers or students, especially for the student at primary school, have the problem how to use the distant learning, and parental engagement in distant learning. Parent cannot support, even though if the parent cannot use the computer, they cannot use how to connect the internet, and how they support the student, they support their children at home. This is also the problem that we know together, and we have to solve this problem. And during the distance learning, also we need more support from the ministry, from the province, or from the district to support and address the challenges. In the progress, also the ministry and development partners also produce the videos, the worksheet, even though in the primary and secondary. Also here in data and percentage, but I'm not mentioned, but also we can say we can produce the video for students at the primary school and lower secondary and upper secondary. And we also distribution of the worksheet to the student at the primary and secondary. In order to get this information, the Department of Planning also contact the survey by Google form in order to get more information and what is the challenges and what is the progress that we are facing during the COVID-19. Even though the hygiene at the school level, so we know at the preschool, primary, and secondary, but so this is we can say the positive, negative. Some schools also thinking about the negative just 2%, but the positive around 60%. But also when the COVID is we can say that not we can say we will go to the field in order to get more information with the school director if the time arrives. Here also we also provide the radio to the district levels, especially for the multilingual education. This is also linked to our topic that we talking about the equality, but also we can say the equity, even though the multilingual education teachers have to get the radios and the PUE, DUE. Yeah. Here we look at the.
Excuse me, sir. So, how long will it take for your presentation?
Almost finished.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, and here also the student from the countryside got the radio. We also have the campaign to the school in order to promote, even though COVID, but we have the campaign such as the pictures as I saw on the screen. Here, what are intervention that we implemented and support to the children and during pandemic. The ministry also developed the Cambodia education response plan to COVID-19 pandemic, and in here also mentioned for the 4 points here focus on the continue remote teaching and learning, safe education return, staff and students are able to teach and learning, acceptable learning environment and the education system. We can say the education system resilient. For the key priority or key intervention, as I mentioned, we have to keep children learning, safe return to school hygiene, and stronger and more resilient learning environment. The intervention, we identify what is the intervention for the support education system during COVID-19. Relevant, but also have more, but it's time constraint, so just show the slide and then we let them discuss later. The proposed for the short term, long term for support the post-COVID, also we have a lot of intervention activity that the ministry is mentioned, and we have to take action and consider together to provide all activity and intervention to support the education sector. And the last also we mentioned what is the the priority or the key intervention post-COVID. We can focus on the school, the teacher education reform, curriculum teaching methodology, school-based management, digital education, higher education, evidence-based planning, and leadership and management of education. And for the role and different stakeholder, just show the logo because the ministry side and the development partners also we join together and be more collaborate together to support the education sector because we think that education is very important for people, children and students. Everyone also needs education. That's why the ministries and the development partners, even though the UN agencies in Cambodia and other countries such as the GB, I would say the Global Partnership for Education also support to the ministry, even though in the COVID also we have the $7 million to support education sector. Okay, thank you very much for your attention, and we can discuss later after all speakers finish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Unsivata, for your nice presentation and useful information about the government intervention and strategy to support the children in youth education. That would be a good start for our discussion later. So next, I would like to invite our honorable speaker from UNESCO, Mr. Danilo Padilla, to convey his remarks. Mr. Danilo Padilla, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you again for inviting UNESCO to this webinar on equality and access to education. It really is an honor to join the distinguished panelists from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, UNICEF, and Union Youth Federation of Cambodia. Let me also thank especially the Asian Vision Institute for convening this important event, which is very timely and much needed during these difficult times. I say timely because we need to look at the progress and challenges facing countries, including Cambodia, in achieving SDGs, in particular SDG 4, as mentioned by Mr. Onsibutha in his presentation, just finished presentation. And much needed as we struggle to find ways and responses to existing barriers and emerging ones brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me just give you a little bit about the global background and statistics. According to new data released on UNESCO's interactive monitoring map, a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, over 800 million students, more than half the world's student population, still face significant disruptions to their education. It ranges from full school closures in 31 countries to reduced or part-time academic schedules in another 48 countries. The data shows that globally, schools were fully closed for an average of 14 weeks since the onset of the pandemic. This figure rises to 22 weeks, which is equivalent to 2/3 of an academic year, when localized school closures are taken into account. The duration of closures varies greatly by region, from as many as 20 weeks of complete nationwide closures on average in Latin America and the Caribbean countries, to 10 weeks in Europe and just 1 month in some Pacific island states. Similar regional differences are observed when accounting for localized closures. For example, the duration of complete and localized closures exceeded 29 weeks on average in Latin America and the Caribbean, compared to the global average of 22 weeks. Governments have worked hard to minimize country-wide closures, down from the 190 countries at the peak in April 2020 to 30 countries now, in favor of partial and or local closures. In 101 countries, schools are now fully open. And in trying to address these issues, UNESCO is working with ministries of education, public and private partners, and civil society to ensure continued learning for all children and youth. It has formulated education responses to COVID-19 mindful of the principles of equality and leaving no one behind. And this is something also that Mr. Onsibuta mentioned earlier. At the global level, UNESCO has convened high-level ministerial meetings to create a platform for policy dialogue on education recovery. Some of the issues discussed include prioritization of education recovery to avoid a generational catastrophe. UNESCO also convened in October last year the Global Education Meeting Extraordinary Session, during which the critical importance of investing in education during these challenging times was unanimously acknowledged. High-level political leaders, policymakers, development partners, and global education actors committed to reinforce global cooperation and investment in education, as outlined in the 2020 GEM Declaration. They also committed to safely reopen schools and strengthen and restore access to services such as school meals, health, wash, and social protection. The declaration also states, and I think this is very important for the national recovery stimulus packages, that should include allocations to education and training. In particular, they should include support measures for recovering all marginalized students' learning loss and socio-economic, socio-emotional impact during educational disruption. The second one is to re-enrollment campaigns and targeted support for learners who are most at risk of not returning to schools. This is especially true for girls, those living in poverty, persons with disabilities, refugees, and persons affected by conflict, crisis, and natural disasters. And finally, training and skills development to increase employment opportunities for people affected by job losses. To address some of the pressing issues related to education disruption, and again, this was also presented by Mr. Onsibuta in his slides, UNESCO has also established Global Education Coalition, bringing together more than 175 members from the UN, and that includes UNICEF, WFP, UNHCR, the private sector, civil society, and academia, to support countries in scaling up their best distance learning practices and reaching children and youth who are most at risk. The Global Education Coalition is committed to maintaining educational equity and inclusion as governments seek to provide teaching and learning opportunities to students through alternative means during periods of school closures. Coalition members will help ensure a full and equitable return to school, and beyond this, build the resilience of education and training systems for the future. Depending on their commitments, coalition members will continue helping countries and other stakeholders apply lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as carry forward investments made during the crisis in line with SDG 4. Other worthy initiatives under the coalition include the Global Skills Academy, the Global Learning House, and the Global Teacher Campus. For example, although most of the Global Skills Academy partners' contributions revolve around skills development for youth and adults, some key partners offer quantitative and qualitative measurement tools related to skills and employment. As the need for quality training content will not fade away with the end of COVID-19, Global Skills Academies partners need to come together to help shape a more sustainable version of the Academy driven by the current and future skills needs at national level. By bringing free of charge quality training content to TVET institutions, for example, in developing countries, the Global Skills Academy intends to level the playing field by offering training opportunities to those who need them the most. Indeed, those kind of training opportunities are in high demand in many developing countries. So there is also the Learning Hub that I mentioned earlier. It focuses on supporting the most impacted STEAM learners around the world and enable them to access supplemental educational resources and instruction at no cost for remedial programs. Ultimately, the Global Learning House will provide at least 1 million learners with new learning opportunities, This is to be achieved by sharing relevant resources, technologies, and networks for distance and hybrid learning, while deploying customized solutions for supplementary, and again, I mentioned cost-free and level-appropriate learning programs. In this regard, I'm really pleased to share that there is an ongoing discussion between the Global Learning House and the Ministry of Education's Department of Information Technology about the possibility of accessing some of the programs and content being offered by the Global Learning House. There is also one important point that the COVID-19 crisis has revealed, and that is that most education systems were not prepared to support teachers to deliver remote learning or to use digital technologies. The pandemic has further accelerated the need to transform teaching and to better prepare teachers to respond to a variety of situations, social groups, and learning needs. Within this context, the Global Teacher Campus aims to provide teachers with training opportunities on the use of ICTs, to conduct remote teaching, as well as to carry out formative assessment. A number of partners have made their teacher development programs, courses, educational resources available, again, free of charge, to support initial and in-service teacher training. What UNESCO will do is match teacher training institutions with partners from the Global Teacher Campus to offer training for trainers and learning opportunities for both pre-service teacher training and continuous professional development. Now, referring back to SDG 4, and in line with its mandate, the Global Education Monitoring Report assesses progress towards SDG 4 and its 10 targets, as well as other related education targets in the SDG agenda. So the report also addresses inclusion in education, drawing attention to all those excluded from education because of background or ability. The report is motivated by the explicit reference to inclusion in the 2015 Incheon Declaration and the call to ensure an inclusive and equitable quality education in the formulation of SDG 4. It reminds us that no matter what argument may be built to the contrary, we have a moral imperative to ensure every child has a right to an appropriate education of high quality. And this is more than ever needed today. So having spoken about UNESCO's global initiatives, allow me please to spend a few minutes to share our activities in Cambodia in support of the education sector. So the first one is the Strengthening Teacher Education Programs in Cambodia, or STEPCAM, which is funded by the Global Partnership for Education and implemented by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport. This actually complements UNICEF's GPE funded program as well. It is worth mentioning that this significant progress has been made towards its objectives and that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport continues to put in place measures to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to delays in face-to-face trainings and workshops, which is very unfortunate. And in further support of teachers, the government's decision to prioritize them in the vaccination drive is really commendable. So this is really a good thing for the government. Then there is also the Decent Employment for Youth in Cambodia, which is supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Under this program, UNESCO implements the Basic Education Equivalency Program, or BEP, and the Factory Literacy Program, or FLP. The online BEP platform and learning management systems were fully developed, and digitalized contents have been uploaded to the ministry's platforms. A total of 22 learning centers have been established, 44 facilitators were recruited in 13 provinces under the management of the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training. Also, a new partnership with mobile operator Smart Axiata was established, and a total of 350 Samsung tablets, 350 SIM cards, laptops, and 500 free data packages from October 2020 to September 2022 have been provided. I think this is really quite useful, especially during this pandemic. Naturally, none of this would have been possible without the strong collaboration of relevant government agencies, including the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, and the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training. Likewise,
excuse me, sir. I think you need to sort out. Sorry.
Likewise, collaboration with development partners, including UNICEF, the World Bank, is really key in ensuring successful implementation of these activities. So lastly, in achieving the SDGs, we need everyone to work together, from high-level political authorities and citizens, states and associations, teachers and parents of students. So everyone has, in his or her own way, a role to play in making the right to education a reality for all. So especially during this challenging time. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Danila, for your valuable comment. Next, please, I would like to invite our honorable speaker from UNICEF, Mr. Chomchandra, to deliver his presentation. Mr. Chomchandra, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My respect to panelists, the audience here who participate in this webinar, and also our viewer on Facebook. It is a real pleasure for me to be here with you today to join this webinar to discuss about how to achieve SDG 4 by 2030 and what UNICEF has been doing to support Ministry of Education and as well as in working in education sectors as a whole during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it's the right timing for us to discuss this, to recall what or reflect what we have been doing and what we are going to do next in a collaborative manners. The world today is very different from it was in 2015 when the SDG was established and formulated. So we are now living through this COVID-19 pandemics. But anyway, we have to bear in mind that SDG 4 timeline is approaching by 2030. It's 9 years also from now in order to achieve all the set target and indicator in the SDG. I just would like to reiterate that SDG 4 is dedicated for education, which aim to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunity for all. That's our goal. So we are now toward that. So I'm pleased to be here to discuss that with our panelists and as well as with the other audience and the viewer as well. Let me start this with the global and regional context. COVID-19 pandemic really created a large disruption for education system in our human history ever, affecting about 1.6 billion learner in around 200 countries in the world. In our region, most countries they have closed the school for more than 200 days already. So it really severely impacting on children learning and also their physical and psychological well-being too. And there also an impact on economic and household living condition. And they also mostly it's about the productivity of the student in the future. The researcher foresee and estimate about the loss of a kind of student productivity up to $1.25 trillion, which is equivalent to 5.4% of our region GDP. That's really kind of impact we have to see. So moving toward the Cambodian context in terms of education in light of COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most common policy that the country has been adopted so far is the close the school in order to prevent the spread or transmission of the COVID-19 in a community. Cambodia, for example, the government closed the school March last year and then reopened a bit like 2 months later because the community even April 2021, and then the government decided to close school again. So like close and reopen, we can say on and off. So this really disrupt the student learning as well. That impact of this about 3.2 million children across Cambodia. With that situation, Ministry of Education, with support from development partner, I'm happy that Mr. Onswata, the director of Department of Planning, have a really clear presentation on that already in terms of the government effort putting together with the development partner to introduce online learning, teaching and learning through different platforms. And then UNICEF and other partners have been along with the ministry to support that endeavor as well. So that really, on top of this, make sure all the video teaching and learning available and reach out to the children and students nationwide. The ministry also made an effort with support from UNICEF, for example, make all the printed material available to support the learning and teaching. However, despite that, effort made by the government and development partners and stakeholders in education, there's some challenges that they face. Based on the rapid need assessment, also mentioned by Mr. Siwata earlier, that's the data come out like just show a worrisome in terms of the learning. For example, 42% of students were able to access to online education, and 30% access to distance learning through TV education broadcast. So that not really less than half of the students can access to the e-learning platform, and 30%, around 30% can access to the TV education broadcast. That's the result of a rapid need assessment. And then there are also challenges where we have to bear in mind and we have to address in a collective manner is the learning outcome. You know, the assessment show a kind of data significantly on the learning outcome. For example, 62% of respondents saying that they thought they were learning something from during the school closure. 3%, very small, they said that they don't learn anything. However, there are 26%, they said that they learn the same as when the school opened, like they were in the classroom. Significantly, this is very kind of promising thing, is that 9% of the respondents saying that they learn much more than when they are in the classroom. So we have to understand that. That's really the result. I think despite that kind of learning platform introduced and then TV broadcasts, different e-lessons, still a challenge that students face. We would see them probably the high dropout rate student due to the COVID-19 pandemic, because Cambodia experienced that the high dropout already even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that, we need to work together to address. That's I want to link up with this, how we are going to achieve this SDG 4 by 2030. So this is pose another challenge for Cambodia. Cambodia is not alone, but many other countries on the globe will be facing similar situation. So UNICEF so far, in order to make sure that the education, the learning is continuous, we've been supporting the Ministry of Education in terms of making sure that students keep learning, supporting continuous learning, distant learning, like Mr. Siwata mentioned in his presentation already, but I just want to second his idea a little bit. I don't want to spend much time on that. For example, we support the ministry to develop this National Education Sector COVID-19 response plan in order to ensure that when the COVID-19 is gone, we are going to have something ready to kickstart in order to provide equal opportunity for students to learn. We also support from UNICEF Cambodia COVID-19 joint education need assessment. We mentioned already, we want to know the impact on education sector and beyond. And UNICEF also support the ministry to produce teaching and learning video and also worksheet in which the sign language also included in all the video clip that we produce in order to reach out to the children with disability. This is a part of our ensuring equitable and access to education regardless of those kind of disability and other background. Number 3 and number 4, we also support the home learning package that focus on the grade 1 and grade 2 student, because the small kid cannot, use smartphone or kind of other platform to study, so that they rely very much on the printed material like paper with support from parents, so that the kid will provide it to around 750,000 grade 1 and grade 2 students across Cambodia, so that they will have the material to learn with the support from parents and caregivers. And number 5, UNICEF, in collaboration with Global Partnership for Education, we support the school block grant. The school block grant go to all the primary and lower secondary school in Cambodia in order to make sure that they increase their spending so that they can, take care of this printed material. They can produce photocopy. They can use that money to photocopy or the worksheet or assignment for students. And that also to support this kind of hygiene and sanitation supply, so that to enable school to conduct any disinfection in terms of COVID-19 if the school reopen. Again, the TV and radio broadcast, and then Mr. Unsivota mentioned already in terms of distributing radio to the ethnic indigenous minority kids, so that they can learn from the radio. It's very impressive. That's really the big reach out to the big population of the ethnic minority kids. If I can tell, more than 7,000 of them, 50% are girls, benefiting from that program. And last but not least is this back to school campaign. Again, we support a kind of the video clip, to raise awareness of when the school reopen, what teacher should do, what parents should do, and what students themselves should do. So this is the investment that we, and then the collaboration that UNICEF and other partners have been supporting domestic education. When it comes to the next step, I just want to briefly elaborate around what we are going to do to work together in order to achieve the SDG 4 target. Despite we see the challenge posed, but again, we have to commit ourselves in a collective manner. We cannot just use COVID-19 pandemic as a good excuse for us to see, hey, we cannot reach that target. So again, where possible, UNICEF keeps advocating for school reopening where safe and possible. And I saw on the Phnom Penh Post this morning, and the ministry spokesperson saying that the ministry rejected all the requests to reopen school from the private sector. So, but again, we'll work together to where possible we can reopen school in the future, in the near future. UNICEF also will continue to work with the government and Ministry of Education and other education stakeholders in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in a holistic manner, and we'll continue again to focus our attention to support teacher and teacher development program. We consider to provide holistic support to children well-being, protection, and we also will support Ministry to introduce a hybrid learning platform, including the face-to-face and online, as well as improve this kind of many other options, including radio and TV program. We will focus on reaching out the most marginalized and the most vulnerable children, including those with disabilities, as well as the children from ethnic indigenous minorities. We also focus on the early childhood education because they are really the most affected during the COVID-19, and then maybe advocate for the government to increase more spending on this sector. And we need to also be kind of flexible in terms of partnership, and especially to promote digital education Without that, for sure, we cannot reach our target. But with this intervention and commitment together, maybe we are hoping we'll achieve the SDG 4 goal by 2030. So I would stop my intervention here and would give the floor over to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chomchandra, for your insightful remarks. So next, please welcome Excellency Rosalind from UYFC to deliver his remarks. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So good afternoon. I am very glad to be back again on the topic of education. I thank you, AVI, for providing me opportunity to share my thought and insight in this very important event. I thank you also, distinguished panelists, for interesting presentations. And I am really grateful that Excellency Hunwani gave me the chance to be his representative in this interesting event. So, as our panelists have revealed on the government intervention and strategy to support children and youth education amidst of the COVID-19 pandemics and also post-COVID-19 recovery. And we also learned that the development partner have come together to have a good initiative and support to overcome the impact of COVID on education. So in view of this, I would go straight to the themes and will extemporize on how to support youth literacy, numeracy, and vocational training for poverty alleviation and national development. So when it's come to national development and poverty alleviation, it includes all aspects of life of an individual and also for the nation as a whole. It also includes a full growth and expansion of our industry, agriculture, social, religion, and cultural institutions, especially education. Moreover, national development implies development of a nation as a whole, and education is the most important feature in this development process. For Cambodia, we literally acknowledge that, and we are grateful to the royal government of Cambodia that keep education is the first priority until this sixth mandate. And we are all aware that the COVID-19 outbreak crisis had negative impact on education, not only Cambodia, but over the world. Schools have been closed to keep students safe. But during this hard time, the royal government of Cambodia somehow managed to find the solutions and measures to overcome this difficult situation. And by and large, Cambodia is on track to achieve the SDG 4 and keep moving forward. First, on the basis of that, the royal government of Cambodia continue to keep education its priority, the first priority. Second, in view of the holistic approach, all relevant stakeholders has been stepping in, and all stakeholders has been on board. And in this case, I would like to take some example from Excellency Hunmani in his capacity as the president of UYFC, in which he always involved in this process by assisting students and youth in education, training, healthcare, sport, and even process. Since 2014, he supported student grade 12 for the intensive learning to be well prepared for baccalaureate examinations. And in addition to that, during this pandemic outbreak, he has been leading the production of educational app, which is a part of producing the digital contents and also the tool to have students to learn during this hard time. And he had also sharing his thought and insight and provide alternative option to tackle the issue with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport during these hard times. Third, all development partner and the ministry have been working hand in hand to overcome this difficult time of COVID-19 outbreak to ensure the equal access for all boys and girls, women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and territorial educations, including university. So this is a point I would do the introduction before I'm going to the main point I would share in this important event. So I would like to share in this platform on how to support youth as students to have quality access to quality education in the context of COVID-19 crisis and post-19 crisis. First of all, I would focus on the policy level. So in this policy, we need to acknowledge that education is a passport for a bright future of youth. The quality of life in future depends on quality of passport. I mean the quality of education for youth and for students. So the policy maker need to be clear that what kind of youth or student we want to be for future for national development. I mean, what kind of cognitive skill, technical skill, their personal trait, their behavior, especially if we look to the 12, I can say the 21st century skill. Normally we have more than 10 basic skill, but we could focus on critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, ICT, technology, literacy, leadership initiative. These are the important skills in this 21st century that we will equip to students and youth. So we must come up with what kind of content in the textbook that we need to produce, and what kind of teacher needed to be equipped, what kind of material to support the learning process, and how to assess the implementation of school curriculums, and what are the support institutions to these core components. It means that when we have the, a clear direction that what kind of youth or student we want to be, what are the contents in the textbooks, the quality of teacher will be well equipped for students, what are the support such material or other administrative support to the learning process. So we need to continue to do leapfrog or catching up at the policy level to align with the global trends in this digital era. Policy is matter, but implementation at grassroots level is more important. We need to figure out each context at school level, at grassroots levels, and coming up with the common policy and measure for a common issue. But we need a particular or specific measure to address the issue in some specific context, because of sometimes one size cannot fit all. So that's why we need to not only at policy level, but we need to figure out the real context of school and grassroots level to come up with a clear and specific measure to different contexts. Can I would focus on implementation levels? We need to have a tool when we have a sound policy, we have a good strategy, but we need to have a effective implementation at implementing levels. We need to have tool, resource, a specific guideline, a clear guideline for school management in implementing the curriculum in the context of COVID-19 and post-COVID. At school level, we need to have the assessment must be done weekly, monthly, in order to provide outreach support to students, in order to figure out the student, which student can be, receive all what, absorb all what teacher teach. But some student has difficulty in that situation because of the family background, because of lack of material, because of internet connection, etc. And also we need the multi-stakeholder approach to address the issue at school level, such as the institution or organization in charge of internet access, providing material, and also community involvement is very important in some extent. It means that some case we need the interaction with community virtually to get information at grassroots level, to figure out, to come up with a clear and specific measure to give the outreach support to those vulnerable students. Third, at individual levels. In this case, I would focus on school management and teacher. Teacher need to be well trained on the use of ICT. This is the case raised by our panelists earlier on this point. Second, school principal, school management, and teacher need to understand the guidance, the specific guidance, the generic guidance set by the ministry or provincial departments, in order to have to keep in mind how to deliver the service to students. And then we need to assess their student regularly, daily or weekly, in order to provide report to school management to assist the student in time. So the connection between implementation level and policy level must be considered. Fourth, I would focus on the student level. The same as individual level, but I would focus on students. We acknowledge that the ministry have been doing a lot of work. Different partners have been doing a lot of work. Other stakeholder, UYFC also provide some support to those process. But we also need the commitment from students in order to address the inequality access to education during the COVID-19. So first, for the students, first must stay motivated and keep your goal, because education is your passport to the bright future. So we need to have a quality passport. It means a quality education for you. Second, you always stay with your clear calendar and follow your calendar every day. You set up the calendar for studying, for learning at home. Third, please connect to school, to your teacher, school management virtually. I mean, you need to contact your teacher for further explanation, ask your teacher in case you are not clear on some point in the lesson that the teacher teach you online or distant or through distant learning. And keep in touch with your classmates to update information, sharing knowledge, and doing your homework together virtually. These are the main activity that students should commit it when you are at home. And I would give some tip also in specific on your online study or distant learning. First, for all students, especially student grade 12 or student for the grade that you will take exam this year. First, you must read all the content of each course that you will learn with your teacher, even virtually. So can take note every time in your notebook on the key point that you need more explanation from your teacher. Third, ask teacher when you are online with him, with her, or send through Telegram, WhatsApp, or through other apps. Do more homework, and always discipline yourself with a specific calendar, daily calendar for your learning. Read more book for free time, and also please work out, do exercise to keep you healthy. And the fifth point, when you are at home for distant learning or online learning, sometimes it's hard for you to manage by yourself because you are not in classroom to talk directly with your classmate, with your teacher, with your peers. But normally you need to, classify all of your subject into clusters. I mean, the cluster approach. I mean, the two cluster approach. When you learn study at home, the first cluster is mean you try to combine all the subject related to mathematics, physics, chemistry, or science into one cluster. And the lead of the cluster is mathematics. Take your time, take more time in your calendar into mathematics. And then it lead to the understanding or increase your comprehension on other science course. Second, the cluster on social study, social science. Please keep your second cluster coming with history, literature, social study, etc. And the main course in this second cluster is history. You read, you learn, and then you keep in mind some event in the history, and then it linked to literature, it linked to social study, it linked to dissertations. Because each cluster has a positive intercorrelation. And do frequently the self-assessment, sometimes with your peers. It means try to give some, problem exercise to your classmate virtually, and then your classmate will, send you the exercise or problem, and you try to resolve this problem and share the idea with your classmate, with your friend, and then ask for further explanation from your teacher. And then access to all education content producing by the ministry, by UIFC, by other institutions. And then try to take all those content which is in line with what you study with your teachers, and read more, to increase your knowledge. They says by taking some simple precaution such as physical distancing, wearing mask, washing your hand. So these are the different level in terms of support use, to national development, to poverty alleviations. It's when the student will be well equipped with a wide range of skill, so it can, gain high salary with good jobs, and then it will going into the development process in the family, prosperity. And I literally acknowledge that the sound policy is matters, but more important than that is to make policy in which should not only treat girl, boy, all as homogeneous group, but try to categorize, try to figure out at grassroots level, at school level, and come up with such kind of specific measure to help to give the outreach support to those students. So in brief, I would reiterate again on this very important topic, especially education to poverty alleviations and national developments. As we know that the education provides a foundation for eradicating poverty and fostering economic development. So in this groundwork on which much of economic and social well-being of citizens is built, education is the key to increasing economic efficiency and social consistency. This is an important point. By increasing the value and the efficiency of labor force through training and education, with the support of each relevant institutions. And this is the point that I would raise for my interventions, and I would take the question later on for this theme. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your valuable remarks. So, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we've been enjoying listening to very insightful comments from our honorable speaker. Our program now approaching to the open discussion session. So, however, we have a limited time, so we will randomly select several questions to address. Now we have 2 questions from our Zoom audience. I'm not sure the owner of the question he stay in here or not. I saw he post the name Naren Mom that he posted the first question about what are the proposed solutions to reduce gap in accessing to education during and after COVID pandemic. So maybe I turn the question to Mr. Unsibata, please. Okay, so I will repeat the question again. I think maybe you also in the Zoom, you may see the question also that he asking, what are the proposed solutions to reduce gap in accessing to education during and after COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for the question. And the question, I think, during the presentation and our speaker also show intervention and how to solve the problem by saying during COVID-19. And a lot of intervention that we propose from the ministry side and from the UNICEF, the UNESCO, and other development partners also propose a lot of interventions such as the provide the distance learning. This is you can say the main activity that we have to take action and kind of the online learning, and we have to produce more videos, clips, and provide more radios and worksheets to the student, even those not in the city but in the countryside, remote area, have to provide more opportunity. They have got more the education, teachings and learning smart skills such as the worksheet. Even though the ministry also, we can say, simplify the curriculum, such as not follow the national curriculum before the COVID pandemic happening, but during the COVID-19 pandemic happening, we simplify the curriculum in order to how to get more access for the student at the school level, even though in the remote area, rural areas, and in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Vata, for your answer. So the same question, may I have idea from Mr. Chomchandra from, excuse me, Mr. Chomchandra?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think it's very good. I think I mentioned some already in my intervention earlier in terms of how we should work together in collective manner in order to improve the access to education, the improve quality education, as well as to achieve this 2030 SDG 4 goal. So that's the point. I think, again, we have to look into our existing support program in terms of online learning. And online learning is a language very popular, people talking about, even in a remote community. Even some don't really know this is an English language. It become almost a Khmer language, like online, online learning, selling something online, and everything's online. And Excellency Salim just mentioned meet with community virtually. That's also online meeting. So, but the point I want to make here is that the need assessment also reveals some sort of worrisome in access to a learning platform. The internet connections, the digital devices is still pose challenges to the poor household, to the rural community, that they don't have that. So we need to look into that kind of how these poor children from a poor household really access to these digital devices and internet connection. So that's really one point. Secondly, we need to make our existing e-learning platform more interactive and more responsive, meaning that we should make it the opportunity for teacher and student to talk to each other, to each other, to chat, to question, to answer, like that more responsive. So that really, it's not the same as the learning in a classroom where students can stand up and then ask question to the teacher immediately or directly, but it's give opportunity for that. I think one part. Secondly, that would improve what I call blended approach. That means the online plus face-to-face. Even though the school still closed at the moment, but ministry have issued 3 weeks ago a directive to allow the school, preschool, primary school, secondary school to organize a small learning group in the community where teacher can move around in the community to reach out to the student. They just want like around 10 of them in one group to learn. So I think that could support online and face-to-face in the form of a small group learning will support. So this is my my brief response to the question. So more or less we can just have improved for that. But again, as I mentioned, we need to maximize the use of our digital education platform, the e-learning asset and material to make it more responsive and accessible by children in Cambodia, regardless of geographical area. That's it. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chumchandra, for your answer. And for the next question, I think that also an interesting question also that relate to online class that you mentioned. This question came from Mr. Sam Eun Chen that he okay, I will read all his comment and question here. I appreciate all joint effort from the ministry and development partner to ensure children and still able to learn distantly and electronically through a lot of digital content development. However, at school level, teachers able to use the familiar with ICT to deliver those content to support children in the key. At the same time, internet connectivity is also vital to facilitate that distant learning possible. At rural area, school might have no internet access. That is the equity issue. I'm wondering if the government could have a policy, one school, one Wi-Fi, and make it a reality so the internet is accessible for all schools across the country. So may I turn this question to Excellency Rosalind, please?
Yes, thank you very much for the questions. Maybe I would going back to the first question first because I have some idea to point out on these questions. Mr. Chandra already cover on many points on these questions, but I would refer to the supply and demand approach in this case in terms of best solution to diminish the gap of access to education. I think in the context of COVID-19, the ministry and also other relevant stakeholder and the relevant partner have been doing a great job on that. But at the same time, I would suggest that we have been working a lot on supply side. It means we try to produce digital content in order to use it, through online learning by using TV, radio, Facebook, and apps. So we focus for a short time. We focus on supply side. But at the same time, I think we should also focus on the demand side. I mean the students. So we try to, figure out how and to what degree that student can absorb or can use the content or tool provided by ministry or by other relevant stakeholders. And in view of this, we should also assess even they can access to online learning, but we do not know the quality or the result of those absorption. That's why we need to do the assessment, frequently, assessing, the student outcome during the COVID-19. And third, we have to have the, figure out the need for support to those students, because students live in different area and provinces, and the internet access is very different. Some are stable, some are not so stable, and some they have the material and tool to access the distance learning or online learning. So we need to figure out the need for support. But related to the second question, I would be very brief on that. We need, to have a holistic approach in responding to what the student have faced the challenge. Holistic approach, I mean not only the ministry in charge of education, but other ministry related to this service, different partner, and parent also need to be involved in this process, and community. And we must make all our effort into this investment. This means how to make students, to make our children to access to online learning, and also how to assess the quality of this online learning. So we need, like Mr. Chandra also raised about the blended approach. I really support this. And at the same time, we should also, in addition to online teachings or distance learning, we need to have the visual learning to have students to, step in the process of providing service to those students. Otherwise, they cannot, commit to this learning process virtually. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Excellency, for your answer. So we have another question. I think this one is from Facebook. The name Jessica Lin. I observed that during COVID-19, education become obstacle for kids, especially students. Okay, I think maybe the same to the second question before that, asking about remote area to access through e-learning. I will skip to another question. Sayha Kun, that he make a question how to make sure relevant stakeholders are well aware of SDG goal, especially goal 4 and accomplish set target timely. So may I turn this question to Mr. Danilo?
Hi, hello. Can you repeat the question, please? I didn't really understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
How to make sure relevant stakeholders are well aware of SDG goal, especially the SDG goal 4 and the accomplished set target timely.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll be very brief. I think what we need really is to advocate more, awareness raising that involves, for example, using different platforms. I know that UNICEF and UNESCO are working towards that together globally and also regionally. We have different platforms, but I think we need to be more proactive. For example, there are a lot of youth associations, community leaders. And each time there is an opportunity to talk about SDG 4. This is, and I think while it is very good to look at the challenges and really highlight the challenges, I think what is also good to show the progress that have been made so far. And I think Cambodia has a lot to show for, and we need to make sure that it is advertised or advocated that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Danilo, for your answer. And next question. Anyway, by our time, we already close to the timeline. So I will select the last question. That the same question from Mr. Narin Mom. That I'm not sure you still here or not. How do you joint access pre-poll funding between Ministry of Environment and partner to support the most remote area in term engagement, holistic access, social equality, education in practical action strategic standard in Cambodia? So I would like to turn this question to Mr. Unsivata because he is he's an audience from our Zoom also.
Okay, for the question, here also I mentioned on the PowerPoint already for how to join the access the fund with the government, the ministries, and the development partner. And the UNICEF also mentioned for the GPE, they support the education during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also we can say the ministry side also welcome and more cooperation with all development partners, not only UNICEF or UNESCO, but other development partners to cooperate and to support the education, especially for the improve the quality of education for all. Especially for the COVID-19 pandemic, also we need more support from the development partners. And also we need more intervention, and we have to discussion and we'll find the way what we have to solve the problem. What is the problem and how do we solve the problem? We know together what is the challenges at the national level, at the grassroots level, especially at the school level, that we are facing with the capacity of the teachers in terms of technology and the student of technology. So how do we address those problems and how to find the way that we have to solve those problems? As I mentioned, I link to the other question also right on that for the remote area as well and equity or equitable of the education. So we keep to provide more opportunities and provide more worksheets and videos. For example, like also in remote area or rural areas, they cannot access the internet. So how do we provide more opportunity to them? So we still have others intervention, such as we still provide worksheet. It's no need to internet the worksheet. And they can, the student can make a small group for the provide teaching to the student. This is the new intervention that we have to provide more opportunity, even though they cannot access the internet. This is the activity. And back to the how we joined the fund with the ministry and the development partner. As I mentioned, for the global partnership for education fund also support for the Ministry of Education during sport in around $7 million during the COVID. We have the support to solve the problem during COVID, but not only the GPE, but other development partners also support the ministry in order to, we can say, to improve the qualities and the access to education, especially for the remote area and public school. This is the main point that they have to cooperate with the development partners in order to make the intervention and provide more opportunity to the students.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Unsivata. So related to this question, may any other speaker have any comment on that? So if no any comment, we will going to close our program soon. Okay, thank you so much, Excellency and distinguished guests, for your valuable comment. As the time limit, we would like to end our discussion here. So before closing our program, may I invite all our honorable speakers for a group photo, please.
Wow, go photo.
I think Chandra, I need to turn your camera.
Well, I'm not sure because when I speak that the camera turn on to me.
Yeah, now it's okay.
Now
Okay.
it's okay. Now it's okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay, if you speak the camera turn on you, maybe you can count to 5 that will turn camera on you.
It's a smart camera. As long as I speak, it turns to me. But if not, it's I don't know. So please take that. Yeah.
Okay. So I will count to 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, everybody fine. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for all honorable speaker for your kind cooperation. Excellency, honorable speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to end the program, please allow me to express my gratitude to all honorable speakers for spending your valuable time with us today, and all the audience for following our program to the end with our distinguished guest aside from COVID-19. Please stay tuned for the next program on Friday of the third week of July 2021. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
Excellency,
you.
and all
Thank you.
speakers.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you
nice
very
day.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.